Porter Larsen, who joins us. Give Porter a follow on X at Larson_ESPN, host of Utes Game Day. And make sure you guys listen to ESPN 700, where you can check out Porter as well. Porter, great having you on, man. Utah is going to be a real interesting team this upcoming season because last year we're really not used to Utah finishing below 500. They went 5-7. They're looking for a bounce back in their second year in the Big 12. What did Kyle Whittingham do this offseason to really improve this roster? What were the areas that he was really focused on trying to get better?
Yeah, well, when you go back to last year, a 5-7 result, right? Only I think second or third time that's happened in Kyle Whittingham's era. He knew he had to go back to the drawing board, knew he had to reset and figure something out. Now, the easy part here is that it was not difficult to diagnose what went wrong last year with Utah. Their entire roster was hurt, right? So, yes, you start looking at maybe some things behind the scenes. You start looking at what your training loads are, what your weeks look like leading up to practice. And I think he's made some adjustments there. But ultimately, the reality is that he went out and got a new quarterback. He went out and got a new offensive coordinator. He went out and got a new running back. He went out and got a lot of productivity from places around the country, right? New Mexico, most notably, that was the fourth best offense in the country per a lot of metrics. And they liked what they saw with Jason Beck. And there's some history there with Jason and a lot of guys on staff, both here at Utah and at BYU and just around the state. And I think there's a lot of confidence that, you go back and look at the 5-7 record last year. Those games were all so close. If your offense is just average or just above average, you're knocking on maybe an 8-win season. You're looking at bowl games. You're looking at maybe if the Big 12 is wide open as we think it might be, getting into that game. And I think that's what Utah is hoping for. They've added a lot of skill positions. They've bolstered their offensive line, which is expected to be one of the better ones in the country. And then they do feel like they have the skill position players to kind of put them over the hump on the offensive side. And yeah, as always, hopefully stay healthy.
Yeah, I mean, look, injuries, like you said, that was really the big storyline of last year. And just the quarterbacks, obviously Cam Rising, it didn't work out. Porter, I think from an outside perspective, all of us were kind of talking how maybe the Cam Rising, every week, not knowing whether he was going to play, kind of wore on the team a little bit. Like, do you think there's some validity to that as somebody who covers the team, knows the team as well as you do? Do you think that uncertainty of whether or not he would be out there every Saturday wore on the team and kind of moving on from Cam, looking at the Devin Dampier era, like that is going to be better for the Utes this season?
No, it absolutely was. It was something that it was tough on the team, not because it was, like drama or uncertainty behind the scenes. They kind of knew what was going on behind the scenes. The thing was that Cam wanted to be on the field so bad, and they knew and they had seen what Cam Rising can do for that team when they're on the field. And he wasn't just their quarterback. If you guys are around that team through the Rose Bowl run, through they had the players that passed away, right? Cam was their entire energy as well, right? He was an energetic leader more than just the quarterback. And you really felt that hit when he was either not there or he was on the sideline and, questionable going into the game. Now, here's the thing. There was also points during the season where they knew Cam wasn't going to play, but publicly they maybe pulled some strings so that the other teams didn't know Cam was going to play. They did that at UCLA. Cam came out and warmed up against UCLA, went through warm-ups with the first team, and at no point during that week was he ever going to dress and actually play. That was a little gamesmanship by Kyle Whittingham, and it actually forced UCLA to start doing some things pregame that they maybe weren't prepping for. It was interesting to see, and then we come to find out that Cam was nowhere near actually playing in that football game. So there was some gamesmanship behind the scenes that I think in the locker room it wasn't as uncertain as it was sometimes publicly, but there was a lot of lack of communication, a lot of pressure on Cam in a new age where he's getting paid by sponsors, he's getting NIL money from a car dealership, right? There was more pressure around him to just be on the field than I think there was. He wasn't comfortable with that. And on top of it, his coach wanted him to, kind of keep quiet about it. And that's kind of what caused a lot of the drama. But I do think the reset was needed and should help this team go forward. Nothing against Cam Rising. He gave the program kind of everything he could physically and otherwise. But the reset, I think, will definitely help this team kind of turn the page.
We're talking Utah here with Porter Larsen. Give Porter a follow on X at Larsen_ESPN. Defensively, we normally don't have questions, Porter, about that side of the ball when it comes to Utah and Kyle Whittingham. They should be really good again on that side of the ball. If there was an area of concern or maybe a question mark going into the season about the Utah defense, what would it be?
Yeah, well, I asked Morgan Scalley about this in the spring, and he said depth at cornerback and defensive tackle, right? The reason for that is because they've lost guys to the draft. They've lost guys to transfer. As you know, Keanu Tanavasa, one of their best defensive tackles from last year, all-conference guy, went to BYU, their rival. So replacing that production on the inside is kind of what they're really looking at. But I think they have the bodies to go through, as you guys are familiar with, a deep rotation at defensive tackle. Aliki Vimahi, Dallas Vakalahi they have there. You'll hear a bunch of Polynesian names in the middle. A kid named Pupu who has really kind of busted on the scene during fall camp. So I think they've kind of figured out a good 4, maybe 5-man rotation at defensive tackle. And then the other question was at cornerback. Who was going to play opposite of Elijah Davis as that starter? And it seems as though Blake Cotton, a transfer, is kind of taking that role. He's 6'2", 195 pounds, right? He's a really good kind of a pro body as a corner, but is still really learning Morgan Scalley's defense and in that man press zone that they like to run. I think that it's probably going to be Elijah Davis and Blake Cotton at those corners, and then Smith Snowden, a guy who you probably will see playing both sides of the football this year, is going to be their slot, their nickel in the corner position. But those are the two kind of question marks. They're experienced at defensive end. They've got a bunch of guys in the linebacker room with Lander Barton, Levani Damuni, and others. At safety, they're pretty set there. So I think if there were question marks about this defense, it's at cornerback and it's about depth at D tackle. But they have the bodies there. It's more just about seeing who's going to get those reps.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's talk about the schedule. Porter, I want to ask you a couple questions about that. Let's start with the Week 1 game, an old Pac-12 matchup, UCLA and Utah. Now we get one out of the Big Ten and one out of the Big 12. But what do you make of this matchup? UCLA, year 2 under their new coach. They should be a little bit better. And then Utah, obviously the first game of Devin Dampier trying to come back after a disappointing season. How do you see that game playing out on Saturday night?
Yeah, I think week 1's always tough to prognosticate. We're going to see both of these teams not at a completed project, right? This is going to be a in process that we're seeing both UCLA and Utah. I think that going into this game, even though we just talked about how Utah's got a new offensive coordinator, a new quarterback, a new running back, a bunch of new faces on defense as well, I still think there's more questions about UCLA. Nico is a phenomenal talent. I still think he's learning to play the quarterback position, right? Mm-hmm. Takes me back to like early days of when Colin Kaepernick was at Nevada. He was clearly a phenomenal talent, but he was like running around with the chicken wing, the ball outside. He was just throwing across the field. He wasn't playing the quarterback position well, but he was so talented that he was making plays, right? I think Nico can do a lot of those type of things. So at any given moment, he can make a game-changing play. UCLA on the defensive side, I think there's a lot of questions there. Up front, they've got some really good pieces up front and in the interior defensive line, but man, there's not many position groups at UCLA that I don't have a question about. And for me, I just feel that Utah is a little ahead of them as far as building this thing, right? They're more plug and play, where UCLA is really trying to get something started. And, we have a 6.5, 7-point spread, depending on where you look. And I think that's pretty fair. Mm-hmm. I think I take Utah there, and I do think that they come in and win this game. I'm higher on Utah in week 1 than I might be on Utah big picture, just because of where they set up with UCLA, where I think UCLA is. And frankly, we talked a little bit before we came on air about Kyle Whittingham and his LA roots. Man, he's had the Bruins number for a decade plus. I don't really see any reason for that changing, especially with all the turnover that they're having to deal with this offseason.
We got about a minute left. Porter, you talk big picture. What is your prediction for Utah this season? Do you think they get to the Big 12 title game this year? Do you see them winning 9, 10 games in about 60 seconds? What's your prediction for the Utes this year?
Yeah, man, well, we're going to learn a lot about Utah early. You get UCLA, a Big Ten opponent, on the road, and then you get your 2 tune-up games in Laramie and against Cal Poly, and then it's Texas Tech. It's the team that in the Big 12 you look at as a competitor as far as the NIL goes, as far as whatever the future of college football looks like. Man, they're in a good position with that right now. They lost their running back. We know that's another story, but we're going to learn a lot. Number 23 Texas Tech comes into Rice Eccles in about a month, and then Utah has a pretty tough Big 12 schedule. BYU, Arizona State. You've got a lot of really good opponents on that schedule. Kansas, and you finish Kansas and Kansas State. I think that Utah is good enough, and if healthy, and if Jason Beck and Devin Dampier can replicate something like what they did at New Mexico, I think this is a team that can win 9-10 games. But, man, I think there's not a huge margin of error because of all of the new pieces that are put together, right? If they're not clicking early, I think we'll have a pretty good idea. But, yeah, no, I think this is a team that if I were to really estimate as of right now, I'm putting them at 8-9 wins. I could see them getting to 10 if healthy all year, and if Jason Beck really gets this thing going and looking like the offense we saw in New Mexico.
Should be a fun season for Utah. He's Porter Larsen. Give him a follow on X at Larsen_ESPN, host of Utes Game Day, and listen to him as well on ESPN 700. Porter, appreciate the time, man. Have a great season. Hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, anytime, guys. Appreciate it.